I'm Asger. You can ask me anything. Today I'm gonna answer this question: what happens when your decisions are made at random? Specifically, I'm gonna give you 10 lessons I learned from living as a dice man for about 6 months. Back in 1996 or thereabouts, one of my friends gave me a book called The Dice Man. It's written by a guy called Luke Reinhardt. That's a pen name, I don't remember his real name, but it really just describes this psychiatrist who's super bored. He feels like he's repeating himself, and people are coming with all the same problems over and over again. So at one point he decides to make the roll of a die determine the outcome of any choice he has to make. Now, I didn't think much about it other than I enjoyed reading the book when I was 15, but about 10 years later, I actually decided to live by the dice, so to speak, for a period of time. And right now, I'm going to share the 10 biggest lessons I learned from this. I'm also going to share a few anecdotes from that period. I don't remember exactly why I decided to try to live by the dice, but I do remember thinking that I was often presented with several options that I had to choose between, and finding myself not really caring whether I chose one or the other. I mean, I'm sure you could relate to this experience, right? Your partner asks you, do you want strawberry ice cream or chocolate ice cream? And sometimes you just don't care, right? In those instances, it's pretty easy and straightforward to just roll a die and let it decide for you. 1, 2, 3, chocolate. 4, 5, 6, strawberry, and so on. Back around 2007, I believe it was, I decided that I was gonna try and live by the dice. I would use 2 regular 6-sided dice, and I would simply, in any given situation where I had more than one choice, I would assign all the choices to the different numeric values of these 2 dice. I would then roll, and whatever the outcome was, I would go through with it. This obviously led to more than one stupid decision, and I am going to share some of them with you. It also really taught me a lot of things. The first thing it taught me was, and this is in no particular order, that I really care about my choices, more so than I actually thought. An example, let's say one of my friends texted me, hey, what are you doing tonight? Want to come out and hang out? Another friend asked me to go to a concert. And of course, there's also just the opportunity to just stay at home, and you can add more options on your own. So let's just use this as an example. I don't know that I did this exact thing, but I've certainly done something along those lines. Number 1, go with your friend. Number 2, go with your other friend, the one who wants to go to the show, the concert. Number 3, stay at home. Number 4, don't answer any of the messages, but go out alone and just see what happens. Etc., etc., etc. Now, initially, I sort of enjoyed, or I don't know if I enjoyed it, but I found myself adding little crazy things. So, go for a bicycle ride, or go swimming, even though it was nighttime. Stuff like that. But once you've done that a couple times, roll the dice, sometimes you actually end up having to do those things. And that just makes you stop and pause the next time you're in that situation and consider all your choices, or at least the ones that you can readily come up with, just a little more carefully. So that's the first realization I had. Number 2, seeing my options more clearly. This ties in directly with number 1. So when you start looking for outcomes to assign to these numbers, in the case of my 2 dice, I would only have 12 potential outcomes, but I don't remember a single instance where I was able to fill out all 12. So this not only tells me that there are always more potential outcomes, or more choices, essentially, than the ones you can think of right here and right now. But that's also a really important hint as to why we are so habitual. We humans are extremely habitual creatures. Even though you force yourself to think out of the box, imagine some other options that you could choose to do right now. Just try to write all of them down. Can you list 12? I mean, you can only list things that you would actually be willing to go through with. So you can't just write, like, murder your neighbor. I mean, that's not an option, because you wouldn't do that, right, if you rolled the dice. So that's actually one of the rules I followed. I should include this here as well. I would never write something on there that I knew that I wouldn't do. Stuff that I didn't feel like doing, that would be extremely uncomfortable doing, yes, but never anything that I wouldn't actually do. Number 3, using randomness to make choices for you is possible, but it truly is a nightmare. I mean, just one example is, I asked the dice with my partner at the time where we should go on holiday. And I remember, I think we had 6 different options. 5 of them were places I really wanted to go. The 6th one was not. And that's exactly where we ended going. So we went to the beach in the middle of the winter, stayed in an ice cold car on the beach for 24 hours, I think. And it just sucked, but the dice told us we'd had to go. Later, it sent us to Mexico, but that's a different story. So it's possible, but sometimes it really sucks. Number 4, one of the major outcomes of living in this way is social ridicule. It's so easy when you sit and assign your probabilities, especially in the early stages of living like this, to just list some things that you can say to other people, or maybe you let the dice decide what you're going to wear that day, and you don't really, what seems as a funny and just a silly little idea when you come up with it and write it on your list, isn't really that funny once you have to go to school in your mom's old blue raincoat or something like that. But if you're serious about it, you do it regardless, and you think twice the next time you fill in your list with options. Number 5, the method is a huge learning experience, but it also ultimately is idiocy. It really is ludicrous, and it's one of those things where you think, I can easily do this as a fun little social experiment with myself and my social surroundings, but you're just left with no other options than concluding just how insane it actually is. Number 6, and this is probably the most profound realization I had. We have a limited degree of choice, and the options we have in any given situation are really 100% defined by our imagination. The options we perceive on any conscious levels shouldn't really correlate with our actual options in the world. But shockingly, they do. I went to this job interview about 5 or 6 years ago, I think. And remember the lady who was one of the main recruiters, she was the boss at the place I interviewed at, and she asked me to name a situation you never thought of before. And I thought about it, and then I realized, this is a trick question. You can't answer that. And I just told her, well, I can't readily think of something I haven't thought of before. That's per definition impossible. And she said, so what you're saying is you just thought of everything, huh? Needless to say, I didn't get the job. I don't think she realized the absurdity of the question she asked me. But it's actually sort of the same situation here. You don't have options that you don't know exist. And that is profound. By expanding your horizon of thinking, you can increase the number of options you have in your future decision-making processes. This is very, very profound. Number 7, it truly is a privilege to be human and to even be able to identify and make decisions. I was left with a sense of gratitude after living as a dice man. Number 8, observing when I would use the dice. Initially, I assumed that I would probably only use the dice in trivial situations. What to have for breakfast? Toast, eggs, toast and eggs, cereal, trousers or jeans, t-shirt or dress shirt, stuff like that. But I actually found myself putting super important stuff on this list. But I remember I was dating this girl back when I did this. I wasn't really that into it or that invested in the relationship, I guess. One day, I assigned a 1 in 12 possibility should I break up with her. And I rolled the dice, and it was only on double 6 that I would have to do this. And I don't even know why I did it, honestly. And I rolled the dice, and lo and behold, I rolled a double 6. And there's actually a secondary point here, because it's not like I just took my phone and called her up and told her, hey, I break up with you. I wasn't that douchey, but it stuck in the back of my mind because I knew I had to do it. Because I had made myself the promise of sticking with the bloody rules of this game. But there's another important thing here. Would I even have created that scenario if I didn't sort of, on some level, want to break up with her. I would have not. And that's another interesting, I think a little part of that actually stuck with me even after I stopped using this technique. But just to go over all the possibilities, it sort of ties in with the one we just went over a minute ago. But if you go over all the possibilities, all the possible things that you could choose to do right now, and also explore some of the ones that you don't actually consider something you would do, maybe you'll realize that some of the ones you come up with just for the hell of it are actually some things that you may have an unconscious or at least unspoken desire to act out. So that's a really interesting lesson as well. All that said, sometimes I did catch myself sort of pretend like I forgot to use the dice in a situation where I should have normally used them if I had stuck to the exact rules. In other words, I sort of identified an element of self-deceit in my dice throwing practice. Number 9. This is also one of the bigger points. Just the realization that applying a simple rule to my own life dramatically changed it. Nina? I don't remember exactly how I coined the rules that I followed back then, but I think it was as simple as at least once a day I need to assign some outcomes to the dice, and I'm gonna throw the dice, and I'm gonna do what the dice tells me to do. But I never had any rules set in stone for, it didn't have to be a 50-50. Let's say I had 3 choices, 2 of which I didn't really care that much whether I did one or the other, but the third one was something I really didn't want to do, but only put it on there for sports, or for the hell of it. I would typically only give that a 1 or 2 point range, like only if it's 11 or 12 or maybe only 12. But I think for me, as a young man in my mid-20s at the time, it was a very profound realization that just using this simple little game, essentially, really, it changed my day-to-day life, but it also taught me a lot of things about life. And this leads me to number 10, which is definitely the biggest one, and that was that at some point, I realized that not only don't I want to live as a dice man anymore, it has actually turned my life into a hell in many respects. I think I started using the dice man system because I thought, I'm actually not quite sure why. I guess virtue signaling thing. If you're familiar with Darwinism, you've probably heard of Darwin's peacock. He couldn't understand why the peacock had such a huge and beautiful plumage because it was really just something that put them out there. It's sort of like yelling to all the predators that love to eat peacock. So here I am. But he couldn't understand how the peacock could have survived with this stupid, huge, here I am plumage, until he realized the element of sexual selection. If you can signal to the opposite sex that you can do something so stupid, so daunting, so death-defying, yet still be here, still be the alpha peacock male, or whatever they call it in the world of peacocks, you must be a strong and good mating partner. I think that's one of the reasons I started doing this, because I saw myself as a rebel. It was just part of my self-image, and also a person that was willing to go through these weird self-experimentation phases. And yeah, I'm sure I did it partially because of that, but I think the other part of it really was just this. I felt that over and over again, I was placed in a situation where I had to make a choice between 2 things, and I just didn't care whether I did one or the other thing. But, and this is the gist of it, the biggest lesson I learned from this is that I do care. Having your choice taken away from you can be a tiny relief in specific situations if you really don't care whether the ice cream is chocolate or strawberry, but in almost all cases, you do have a preference. You just need to get in the habit of finding it. And using this system, as inconvenient and socially awkward and horrible as it was, it actually really made it much easier for me to, well, first of all, stop using the system and feeling great about it, but also just to enjoy, okay, I have options, and I actually do care in most cases. By acting as a fool for 6 months, roughly, I actually became smarter, and first and foremost, I learned some things about myself that would have otherwise probably remained invisible. So that is what happened to me when my decisions were made at random. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything, has value to me. And don't forget to ask your questions in the below. I'm Asger. You can ask me anything, and I'm probably going to answer your question. And thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one. Cheers.